Hey there. Alright, so with Golden State making the first move in the Great Wave Off, let's do some way too early power rankings and look through everyone's roster. Now, teams have to have 12 players this year. Under the new CBA, the active roster can't be 11 or 12 anymore. They have to have 12, with those 12 players being under the $7 million salary cap. Now, along with that, each team also has 2 developmental spots, players that do not count against the cap unless their contracts are turned active. Now, looking at how we have the team slotted here, closer you are to the team logo, the more you're getting paid. So for the Connecticut Sun, Brittany Griner is making the most on this team, actually pulling in a max contract. Kennedy Burke has about $1 million contract, and everyone else you see makes less than that. Now this team actually has the cap space to go out and get someone like a Natasha Cloud and so on and so forth, but obviously with them moving, they're probably tanking. So again, having to hit 12 players, you're gonna see these players make the roster because most of them have guaranteed contracts, and even the players on unprotected contracts are considered pretty valuable players on the market. I mean, quite frankly, Angel Reese's contract considered unprotected. And in the case of the Connecticut Sun, your Aaliyah Edwards, Anissa Morrow, Sanaya Rivers, Lila Lakin are all on unprotected contracts, but will more than likely make the cut. And then behind them on training camp contracts, you have players like Shea Petty, Harmony Turner, Madison Hayes, Reagan Beers. So the Sun are a team that could move up a few slots and still make some moves as far as signing players. You still have Tina Charles out there, who specifically played for the Sun last year, along with Bria Hartley, Diamond DeShields, and again Natasha Cloud. So if they wanted to, they could make some noise, especially with this group of role players. And I think that's really the story for all 5 of these teams. You're gonna name your 1 and 2 players, but adding a superstar or a go-to player on any of these 5 teams would immediately change the dynamic. So looking at the Fire, again, same thing. Adding a superstar would immediately change what you have going on, but you have some solid players in Carlton, Gustafson, Suggs Sutton, Samuelson, Geisel Soder, who are all making the most on this team and are more than likely going to make it through training camp. Now we could see someone like Nika Mulby moved, and that's when you are reminded that this team is still holding on to players like Maya Caldwell, Emily Inksler, Carla Late, Sarah Ashley Barker, and Chloe Bibby. So they're sitting on talented players, again, a group of role players that could use some direction in a star player. But that's why I have them at around 15. Again, they could move up a little bit, but this is pretty much what you're looking at for their roster. Now on to the Mystics, which would probably be the most questionable team on the list, if for nothing else but for Georgia Amore. But I have to see what this team is doing with all these forwards. I like the players, especially the ones they drafted, but after matching the restricted free agency offer on Shakira Austin, pretty much locked in her position at least for this year. So this season, you're just rocking with a lot of forwards. You do have Sonia Citron and you do have Georgia Amore coming off her injury. And while this is another team with cap space who could go out and get another guard, they're sitting on a few training camp contracts on top of the 4 players they drafted. So I have to just see how they play together, because more than likely this is going to be the roster, and then they'll probably still have to add a guard. I don't know when, but they are still sitting on Lucy Olsen, Madison Scott, Rory Harmon, who is a rookie, but you could get some good play out of her. Depending on what the Mystics are planning in the background, they could be looking for a lottery pick next year anyway. Okay, and then on to the Storm, who I really like. I think they did great in the draft, especially grabbing Flau'jae Johnson and Awa Pham. Now, they did lose Ezzie McBagger for a few weeks in the beginning of the season, but as you can see, that's their highest paid player. And then you have Natisha Heidemann, Stephanie Dawson, Jade Melbourne. So you have some solid starters, and this team is going to make some noise with their young players, especially Malonga and Pham. But again, you got Jordan Horston, who's coming off injury, so we may or may not see her slotted. Developmental injury reserve, Tyna Mayer, Jalen Brown, Lexi Brown, Zaya Cook. So again, another team with not as much space, but depending on what they're looking for, this is that group that needs a star. So I don't really see them making too much noise. There'll be some upsets for sure, but this is more a team I feel like is planning for the future. So over the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see some solid strategic moves from the Storm. Okay, on to the Mercury. Valkyrie, who I feel like let free agency and the offseason just get away from them. They were able to keep Kalia Copper and Alyssa Thomas. That's the main reason they aren't at the bottom of this list. But after that, I'm really not seeing the vision. They lost Satou Sabally, which was really their main X factor, that unicorn when you couldn't really figure out what was going on down the stretch. But they were able to keep Whitcomb, Bonner, Mack, McConney, which I love. And outside of who you see here, everyone else is on a training camp contract. And they don't have the most cap space, but they definitely have a lot. Now, that relationship with Natasha Cloud is probably a little soured, and they just bought out Kaylani Brown's contract. So outside of Kalia Copper, Alyssa Thomas, DeWanna Bonner, Phoenix could be on a tank job too. Thomas knows this is probably her last contract. Kalia Copper has a little more in the tank, so whoever they bring in over the next couple of years, maybe there's something she can pull out before the end of her career. But this is actually a team I could see fall down the list rather than jump up and surprise people. Okay, and rolling on into number 10, we have the Chicago Sky. We are not in the dancery. I'm not hating today. Like I said, I think Jeff actually cooked a little bit after losing Angel Reese. I'm a big fan of Dejanay Carrington, Skylar Diggins, and Rakia Jackson. So as a team, we'll have to see how they play on the floor. But I definitely think they're better than the last 5 teams we went over. Or at least they could beat them in a playoff series, or at least have the winning record after playing them a couple of times throughout the season. Obviously, Azare Stevens is making the most on this team. They don't really have any more cap space. These top 5 players here are making over $600,000 or more. Cardoso and Jackson are on unprotected contracts, but they are still working through their rookie contracts. And then right behind Rakia Jackson, you do have Rachel Banham, JC Sheldon, Gabriella Hawkes, Haley Van Lith, Maddie Westbeld, their other draftees, and a handful of training camp contracts. But this is pretty much who you're going to see. Again, this is who's getting paid this year. I highly doubt they're going to release anyone on an unprotected contract because they would be snatched up pretty quickly there. And with who you're looking at, this team is pretty heavy in that 3-4 position. So it'll be interesting to see how Rachel Banham and JC Sheldon can lead this team and try to get some wins. Okay, and then the tempo, the expansion team that I feel did the best here as far as having some competition in an expansion draft. Obviously, you have Marina Mabry, Brittany Sykes, Timmy Fag-Benley, Nyara Sabally, Julie Almond, Izzy Harrison, and one of the lottery picks, Kiki Rice, making the most on this team. Now right behind her, you have Aaliyah Nye, Lexi Held, Khadijah Latska, Kia Nurse, and Christy Waller. With their 1-2-3 punch being Mayberry, Sykes, and Fag-Benley, I think you start getting into the territory where you can start to guess who the team is going to play through. And then even past that, Sabally is a pretty good scorer, Harrison's pretty solid in her position, and a solid young guard in Kiki Rice can more than likely make some noise on a team like this that's just being put together, where everyone is going to be a little bit hungry, especially under these new contracts. Okay, and then rolling into the Golden State Valkyries. Again, we're getting closer to who we know we're playing through as we get higher and higher. Gabby Williams, Veronica Burton, Kayla Thornton, Kyla Charles even making the most here on this team. Kyla Charles obviously made a big impression on the Golden State Valkyries last season and really just those last few weeks of the season. And then Tiffany Hayes comes in right behind her. I think she may have been really close to a Natasha Cloud situation, or if you held out too long, you probably didn't have a contract at all. Versus in the beginning where they probably were vying for, if not the max, but very close to it. And Hayes specifically landed at $600,000, and it is a protected contract, so that could have something to do with it. And also, we don't know how many years these players were asking for, specifically Hayes and Natasha Cloud being in the later part of their careers. And then of course Janelle Salon, Cecilia Zandalicini, and then right behind Zandalicini, Alania Rupert, Justice Jositi, Kaya Stokes, and Kate Martin. Now after that, you have your training camp contracts, Letitia Hamahir, Caitlin Shin, but for the most part, this is your roster. This team doesn't have a lot of cap space, so while they did make the first waiving, that's usually to make room for one of the international players and see how they fare through training camp, because they can always use the WNBA contracts, even a training camp contract, as leverage overseas. Okay, and after the Valkyries, I have the Minnesota Lynx, who are really this high because of Nafisa Collier, Kayla McBride, and Courtney Williams. Now, adding Olivia Miles did give them a little more juice, I will admit that, but we don't know how long Fee will be out, though I am assuming for the most part everyone's going to be healthy. Now, the Lynx don't have a lot of cap space, but they definitely have enough to pick up a player. So if they wanted to, we could see a shakeup here. Not really sure what they want to do going into the next couple of years, though this could be a tough team. They could fall really far down the ranks here. One, by losing Nafisa Collier, but two, just not having a solid structure here, losing a lot of the players that got them that far over the last 2 to 3 years. But a big move in the W fairly recently is getting a very high pick 2 to 3 years in a row. We saw the Wings do it, we saw the Fever do it, so they could possibly be vying for another high pick next year or make some move in the offseason. But really everyone else is on training camp contracts besides Jalen Sherrard, Anastasia Kosu, and Lainey White. It doesn't look like they're trying to go too far. This particular one, I'm probably the second most questionable behind the Mystics, but if Collier is healthy, I still think they would be able to take out the Valkyries, let's say, in the playoffs. That's where I'm kind of gauging that. All right, and then to follow that up, if the Fever were to go up against the Lynx, I feel like they could take them out, and that's where we go from here. Obviously, you have Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, who is technically making the most, but that's because she has one more year signed than Asia Wilson, but they're making the same amount in 2027 and 2028 because it's a percentage of the cap, so it's actually on this scale. Those two have pretty sick contracts. And then you have a bit of a drop off, but they're still getting paid. Monique Billings, Lexi Hall, Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark, Ty Harris. And then right behind her, still pretty much on a guaranteed contract, Maisha Hines-Allen. And then you get into a Raven Johnson, who's more than likely going to make it, Michaela Timpson, Dantas McConnell. Sydney Colson is still listed as one of their unrestricted free agents. Now, she is coming off an injury, so I'm not surprised. But technically, they would have room for a vet minimum salary on any tier. But yeah, I see the Fever making the playoffs, making some noise, probably second round, depending on the matchups, but they look pretty good. All right, and then we get into the big dogs. Number 5, I have the Dallas Wings. Now, I know this puts a lot of stock in a team that has to create its chemistry, but I feel like they have a jump on those 10 through 15 teams with Arike Gumbawale and Paige Beckers. Not just going through the first season, but going through something like Unrivaled and Paige being so open about having Enrique's back. The Wings obviously kept their faith in Agumbawale, so I think they've created culture over anything else. And then grabbing Elena Smith, Jessica Shepard, Awakwir, I definitely think these were players who want to be here for the Wings and play beside AZ Fudd, Paige Beckers, and be a team to beat. Now, they're on training camp contracts, but they do have some decent veterans on the bench. Alicia Clark, Odyssey Sims, they'll more than likely end up keeping Lee Rue. They have Lindsay Allen, Isaiah James, JJ Quinterly. So again, these are the players you're more than likely going to see. Having to have at least 12 on your roster, I'd be surprised if any of these players actually get cut. Okay, and then on to the hot team of the summer, the Atlanta Dream. Alicia Gray, Ryan Howard, Brianna Jones, Naz Hillman, Jordan Canada, Angel Reese, and Tahina Paopao. Now right behind her, you have Medina Okot, Taylor Theory, which I'm still not sure what they're doing about that number 5 situation. But Atlanta is a team that has some cap space. I mean, it wouldn't be pretty, but you could squeeze a Natasha Cloud in here. I know I'm trying to put her everywhere, but that is good value out there on the floor, especially for a team that's at least trying to be tough and make it far in the playoffs. They want to go far, and that just beefs up the roster. I mean, that's a hell of a guard coming off the bench, second, third string. But I do think Atlanta can make some noise. They were cut off at the knees by the Fever last year, but they were primed to play well into the postseason. Now, they did lose Brittany Griner, but were able to add Angel Reese, as well as keeping Brianna Jones. Your 1-2 punch being Alicia Gray and Ryan Howard. I think they filled out their role players, their bench, their second string. I don't think it's in their best interest to be done, but if they are, I still think there's a team that can make it into the second round. I do think they can beat the Wings and every other team behind them in the playoffs or in that season series. All right, and then in the number 3 slot, I have the Los Angeles Sparks. Dearica Hamby, Ariel Atkins, Kelsey Plum, Neko Ogumake, Erica Wheeler, Cameron Brink, and Ray Burrell. Now, you do have a handful of training camp contracts: Sanaya Fegan, Emma Cannon, Julie Van Loo, and I'm excited about their draftee to Nia Latson. I think that's a sneaky pickup, especially how late in the draft they picked her up. And while they do have cap space, this is not a team that needs another guard. So I don't really see them making any big moves, especially when you look at who they have on the wing position and at your bigs. So the Sparks are pretty stacked in their starters. And then once you start to look at their second string, you still have trouble on the floor. That's why I put them this high. I think this is a team full of veterans, full of players with the experience to pull together 1 year, especially in the W. But on paper, and if they really fell into full swing, I could see the Sparks taking out a lot of teams. All right, and then showing respect to the Liberty, I have them at number 2. This is probably a team that was able to do all of the things in the offseason. Keep their core in Sabrina Ionescu, Brianna Stewart, Jonquel Jones, adding a really good piece to that core in Satou Sabally, and then still being able to fill out your bench with high value role players. Now, Lainey Hamilton is recovering from injury. Then you have Rebecca Allen, Leonie Fibbage, Rebecca Gardner, Dee Richards, and then you get a bit of a fall off into the training camp contract. But with having this much cap space left, they definitely could have brought back Natasha Cloud. This team is the most questionable, I would say, and why the conspiracy theory started about her not having a contract. And as much as we can speculate on the salary, it could have been close to what Sophie Cunningham was talking about, wanting more years on the contract, especially with a lot of these players going into some of their last contracts. And this could be the owner's payback to all of these players who on purpose were free agents going into this season. All right, and then last but not least, and obviously number 1, we have the Las Vegas Aces. They were able to keep their entire core, not just the starting 5, but the 6th player off the bench as well. Asia Wilson, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, Jewel Lloyd, Nalissa Smith. They were able to add Stephanie Talbot, Dana Evans is still there. They're holding on to Kirsten Bell, Cheyenne Parker-Tyus, and they were able to sign Brianna Turner. Now, coming off a championship run, you may not see a lot from the players they drafted. Hopefully they make the team, but the Aces are also giving a shot to Kennedy Carter in training camp. So if she makes it onto the roster, that could change the look of this team literally overnight, because then other teams really have to plan for that second and third string. You have Jewel Lloyd coming off the bench, and then behind her you have Kennedy Carter. So the Aces get that edge, get that bump, even though New York probably had the best combination of all the areas you could hit in the offseason. The Aces still look to be the strongest team in the league. You're not going to get a better big in Asia Wilson. You're not going to get a better point guard in Chelsea Gray. And they keep solid role players around them. And if not that, players willing to step it up when their superstar says it's time to put it in gear. And that's pretty much what we're looking at going into the 2026 season. I don't see a lot of changes here as far as the faces that you see. Their training camp contracts are going to change. Development contracts will be assigned. But this should be a fun season. And I'd be happy to see some shuffling here. And we're bound to see that, especially with injuries and things like that. But yeah, let's see who makes it to opening night.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, players.